There are signs this morning that Victoria may have turned the corner in its battle against coronavirus, but the state's hard lockdown is taking a toll. Yesterday, Victoria recorded its lowest daily increase in cases in 5 weeks, with 216 new infections and, tragically, 12 deaths. Experts agree that the numbers are moving in the right direction, but there's evidence the uncertainty is having a major impact on mental health. Beyond Blue says 75% of its contacts this month have come from people in Victoria.
Nationally, there's confusion around the federal government's vaccine policy, with the Prime Minister walking back suggestions a vaccine will be mandatory. However, Health Minister Greg Hunt won't rule out bans on travellers entering or leaving the country if they're not vaccinated. Our reporters Zali Rismail and Kathleen Ferguson are standing by for us this morning. Good morning to both of you. Kathleen, kicking off with you. So there's not even a vaccine yet. There may not ever be a vaccine, but speculation has been swirling around whether or not it will be mandatory.
Good morning, Michael. Yes, that's right. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, was here in Sydney yesterday to announce this deal with Oxford University to manufacture its vaccine, if it is successful, here in Australia, to make it free for all Australians. But yes, there is confusion over whether it will be mandatory. Scott Morrison saying yesterday it will be as mandatory as possible, but then backtracking and saying it will not be compulsory, it won't be forced upon Australians, that the government doesn't have the power to do that. But there has been talk about sanctions on people who don't get the vaccine. The federal government's expectation is that 95% of the population will be vaccinated. So there is talk about, Scott Morrison alluded to the no jab, no pay policy that he was responsible for yesterday. Also talk about this international travel if you're not vaccinated. Also simple things like catching public transport or going to restaurants might be a problem if you're not vaccinated as well. But the health experts advising the government also said yesterday that they expect there will be quite a big uptake of people who voluntarily want to get a vaccine once it is available, and that will be how they'll do it in the first instance. But also they've also said that the call out, that call out will be voluntary, but the government has a lot of time to clear up this confusion because this vaccine is still in human trials at the moment. It's not clear whether or not it will be successful, so they've got many months to figure this out.
They do indeed, and hopefully, as you say, Kathleen, there will be a vaccine to have this debate around. Thank you. And let's go to Zali in Melbourne. Melbourne's still front and centre in the battle, the national battle against the virus. What's the latest there?
Good morning, Michael. Well, sadly, another 12 deaths reported yesterday. That brings the state's death toll to 363, accounting for more than 80% of the national toll. The vast majority still being linked to aged care. But on a better note, we are seeing this downward trend in numbers continuing, with experts increasingly confident that we have passed the peak of this second wave. Now, we saw 216 new cases recorded in Victoria yesterday. That's the lowest daily increase for more than 5 weeks. We also saw active case numbers dropping by almost 120 cases yesterday. Victoria's Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton, yesterday saying the numbers were a good sign, saying we've only seen 4 new outbreaks recently. But there are still concerns about low testing rates. In the last week, we've seen 30,000 or so fewer tests conducted than in previous weeks. Now, that represents a 17% drop. Authorities saying that we need anyone with even the mildest of symptoms to get tested so that they can have a very clear picture of what the virus is doing in the community, so they can then even consider easing these restrictions.
And Zali, also intensified concerns this morning about mental health during the pandemic.
That's right. Well, while the rest of the country slowly easing restrictions, in Melbourne we've got these very, very harsh stage 4 restrictions. Many businesses closed, many people at home unsure of what the future holds, and unfortunately that is translating to a surge in calls to mental health support services. We have Beyond Blue reporting that Victoria's call rate is 90% higher than the rest of the country, with 75% of all calls in August to Beyond blue originating from Victoria. Now, that's led health authorities to urge people to reach out for help if they are struggling, to reach out for those helplines, and also to consider talking to their GP for a mental health care plan, also to consider taking advantage of that telehealth, which has been expanded this year due to the pandemic.
Zali, Kathleen, thank you both there for the updates. Meanwhile, urgent testing and contact tracing is underway in Queensland this morning after a woman tested positive for COVID-19 in Japan after flying home from Australia. Health authorities say the woman came to Australia in mid-July and tested negative twice after 2 weeks in hotel quarantine. Now, she recently flew back to Japan without any symptoms, but then returned a positive test. 6 of her close contacts in Brisbane are in quarantine undergoing tests, and health alerts have been issued for a flight the woman took from Brisbane to Sydney on Monday. A cafe she attended on Sunday has also been closed. Queensland's health minister is due to speak next hour.
From midnight tonight, cross-border communities will be banned from entering South Australia unless they're deemed essential travellers. The restrictions have already caused massive headaches for locals who've been struggling to get exemptions. It comes as the New South Wales Deputy Premier John Barilaro calls for the permit system between his state and Victoria to be scrapped. He's due to meet with officials in Albury-Wodonga today to discuss the possible easing of restrictions.
A tenant support service in Victoria says it's concerned by the results of a survey that found many respondents were struggling to get rental relief during the pandemic. Tenants Victoria says at least a third of those surveyed were ignored by landlords entirely when asking for rent reductions. The federal government's ban on evictions is set to end for most tenants at the end of next month. But Tenants Victoria says it's confident it will be extended as the state struggles through that second round of lockdowns. Spain has reported its highest number of coronavirus cases since the country eased strict lockdown measures in June. More than 3,700 new cases have been reported just in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, Argentina has exceeded 300,000 cases and 6,000 deaths as that country battles a surge in recent weeks. But there's some good news in the United States this morning, with medication costs for COVID-19 patients dropping sharply in the last 3 months.